So Matt Hancock fronted the government's daily press conference today, and he opened with the sad but sadly predictable, as you say, increase in the number of deaths. Now, look, if we look at this graphic here, we'll see that the Health Secretary said that overnight there have been an increase in deaths by 87. That takes to 422 the number of people in the UK who've tested positive for coronavirus and have since died. Now, what that means is that we are tracking Italy, and Matt Hancock made clear today that the government is preparing for that, and he made the announcement that the NHS and the military are turning the giant XL conference centre in the London Docklands into a hospital. It will have 4,000 beds.
Nick, going back to the sort of political framework for all this, there has been a lot of consensus amongst all the parties to follow the government's plans. Today, that looked as if it was starting to unravel a bit.
That's right. So a row today between Sadiq Khan, who's the London mayor, and ministers over two issues at the heart of this lockdown. The first one is overcrowded tube trains, and the second one is the extent to which construction workers should be going to work. So Matt Hancock hit out at the London mayor, saying that it's wrong that there's overcrowding on the tube and it's caused by a reduction in services. The London mayor hit back and said that the services have to be reduced because there's been a 30% reduction in London Underground staff because they're observing the protocols around coronavirus. And then the London mayor said, well, I tried to reduce the number of people on the tube because at the Cobra meeting on Monday this week, he recommended that only construction workers working on safety projects, only they should be going to work. He was supported by the devolved administration ministers, but that was not accepted by Boris Johnson. Now, Matt Hancock says it is OK for people to go to work as long as they meet at least two of three conditions. And they are that the work can't be done at home, or they are a key worker in the front line, and that both, as he said today, need to be observing the social distancing protocols.
Nick,
where possible, people should work from home, and employers have a duty to ensure that people are more than 2 metres apart, because as Jenny says, it's about going back to the principles of what we're trying to achieve, which is to keep people apart so that we slow the spread. And the more people follow the rules, the faster we will all get through this.
Well, big pressure from the Conservative benches on the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, today, saying you've got to really help self-employed workers. The government, the Treasury are going to act, but they are saying it is fiendishly complex.
OK, Nick, thanks very much. A lot to unpack there. And joining us now, Iain Duncan Smith, the former Conservative leader and Work and Pension Secretary, Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester, and Peter Fahy, the former Chief Constable of Greater Manchester. Many of the guests will join us by Skype tonight for reasons I'm sure you'll understand. And Andy Burnham, if I can start with you, can you help us distill the message for who should be going to work tomorrow?
I'm afraid I can't, Emily. You know, I'm here. I want the government to get this right. And to be fair, the Prime Minister did get his message right and he delivered it very well. But it was undermined when it became clear that there had been a decision taken to allow non-essential work. And there are many, many people who've been in work today and who are now frankly confused and quite worried. And if I could, Emily, just summarise where we've got to tonight. So I've been contacted by somebody today saying they work on a building site. They're now having to go home because they live with their elderly mother who has health problems and they're having to go back in tomorrow. So you've got that on the one hand. Then you've got other people worried if they go out for 2 runs, they might get a fine from the police. I mean, the contrast is ridiculous, to be honest. And this is an unsustainable position. The government should be very, very clear now that all non-essential work should stop. It is a stay-at-home message, and I'm afraid that message just isn't clear enough tonight.
We've got different stay-at-home messages in different nations of the UK. Construction workers, we were told Nicola Sturgeon wants to shut the sites down, the building sites down. Boris Johnson wants to keep them open. What would you advise?
I'd say close them. Unless they're for absolutely essential work, like hospitals, as Nicola Sturgeon said. And I think this gets to the heart of it, Emily. This decision about allowing non-essential work appears to be taken for economic reasons, when actually, when you're in the middle of a global pandemic, health reasons alone really should be guiding all decision making. Now, this is why I'm on your programme tonight. This matters because the virus has probably been spreading in Greater Manchester today in building sites, in canteens, in call centres, and probably will do tomorrow because people are still having to go into work tomorrow because employers are keeping their sites open. And that'll be true in the West Midlands, certainly true in London. So the problem's getting worse, and that's why this matters, and that's why it needs to be cleared up.
Let me turn to Iain Duncan Smith. That's quite a stark claim from Andy Burnham that it is economic reasons driving this. Certainly Matt Hancock had the chance to say non-essential workers must stay away from workplaces. He didn't. Why not?
Well, the government, I thought, made it pretty clear, actually, when you get down to it yesterday. It was the biggest decision that any Prime Minister, any government has made with regards to people's liberties. Yesterday, we made a decision to massively reduce the number of people out on the street. Yep, there are issues around the use of the tubes and some of the people getting to work, and we can debate how much of construction is actually essential to be done. But the truth is, the vast, vast majority of Britain yesterday got a very strong message. You stay at home, you try and do your work from home, and businesses are being given support where they can't continue. So there are big positives in a very difficult environment. And we can be very, very, very picky about this. But the truth is, this is a developing process. The government will be and is reviewing this whole process about who should now go to work on the margins of the decision to have only key workers in work.
Iain Duncan Smith, it's not. You'll forgive me. It's not about being picky, is it? When there are hundreds of thousands of workers who don't know what they should be doing, and
but I'm
he
not
could have.
referring to what they do. I'm referring to actually the way the programme is being launched at it at the moment. Nothing is absolutely perfect. We have to accept that. This is a situation that is unprecedented. And so we are trying, the government, I'm not in the government, I believe, is trying to make sure that it gets the balance right. We made a huge move last night. I understand that the government is keeping this completely under review. There are issues about the reduction of transport in London, and there are big question marks as to why that has been the case, because even if you took construction workers out of this, you would still have fewer tubes, etc., running to get key workers in, and they would be more crowded than they should be. So there are big issues to be looked at beyond that. But of course, the government needs to review, in the light of what we're seeing today, whether or not all of these construction workers are actually really essential in making sure that they do their work. Do they need to go?
And I appreciate, I know you're not of the government, but you're of the governing party. So could I just ask you for your opinion? Because Matt Hancock said today, if they absolutely cannot work from home, they can still go to work to keep the country running. In your opinion, should non-essential workers now be told not to go to work? That simple.
I think it defines what you mean as non-essential workers. So this is the critical question. They need to define exactly what, in terms of the construction workers, need to go to work. Let me give you an example. There are such things as emergency construction jobs that have to be done. These people will be, as it terms, key workers because they will be doing something that mends something or stops something going wrong. Those are critical. The question is general construction, and to what degree is it needed the economy is part of the whole issue. We've got to keep this running, but there is a balance. If you ask me what my view on this is, I think the balance is now where we should delete some of those construction workers from going to work and focus only on the emergency requirements.
Let me ask you, Peter Fahy, how easy this is for your forces to enforce. We heard from Andy Burnham the complication of having one chap going into work and then going back to his sick mother and another person wondering whether they were allowed to go for a run in the morning and a run in the evening. I mean, for police, it's a complete landmine, isn't it?
It is. It's a huge shift in the style of policing in this country. We have very few police officers to heads of population compared to like a country like Italy. We don't have a paramilitary police force. We have a different relationship between the police and the public here. We've seen a sharp reduction in the amount of activity today, but we're going to need to see a much greater reduction in the number of people out there if the police can have any hope of enforcing it. But generally, it's got to be about public opinion. It's got to be, sadly, about more and more tragic cases being exposed in the media, stories from doctors, nurses, people on the front line. So in a way, the public fear this so much that that will be probably the greatest driver of the change in behaviour.
I mean, let me just ask you very simply, you don't want people to rat on their neighbours if they're flouting rules, do you? You don't want people to call the police if they see a gathering in the park, or do you?
No, I don't think the police have got the capacity to deal with this. The police already, before this happened, were already very stretched. So absolutely, the police can't have lots of people ringing up to say, can I do this journey? Can I do that journey? And I don't think do have the capacity for people to try and, reporting, the fact that their neighbour has been out twice today. But on the other hand, big groups gathering, people that are deliberately flouting it, the police will want to deal with this. And if they can, will want to challenge it. But as I say, I think the big fear amongst police officers is that as the NHS becomes more and more stretched and the ambulance service, they will have to play a greater role, protecting and supporting vulnerable people who can't see any other way out. And they will need absolutely huge public support in them complying with the rules and regulations, absolutely, because they want to save lives.
Andy Burnham, we talked a little bit about employees facing, possibly the wrath of their employers. If you were self-employed, would you be going to work tomorrow? If you could choose not to, but know that there was no money, what would you do?
I think that's the point, isn't it? You've got millions of people in that position debating that very question tonight, Emily, and they weren't given clear advice today at the press briefing. And the truth of the matter is, there's a lot of people out there who can't afford to follow the Prime Minister's advice. So the stay-at-home message, well, it's difficult for them, isn't it? Because what do? We had a Cabinet Minister last week saying he couldn't live on statutory sick pay. And why should then he expect other people to be able to go out and do that? So this is a really difficult position. And this is the problem. We've got one group of people being treated one way where their earnings are protected, and self-employed workers, contractors, freelancers being treated in a different way. And you can't build a sense of national unity to fight this thing when you've got that level of difference between the way different groups are being treated. And that's why the government should have said today, non-essential work stops. And by the way, we are protecting the earnings of self-employed people, freelancers and others. That is what they should have said today, because clarity is at a premium right now. I just want to stress again, Emily, I want the government to get this right. I want them to succeed in beating this, and I'm there to help them. But in my advice, having been in a similar position, not as big as this, but a similar one 10 years ago with swine flu as Health Secretary, I know that you have to have clarity. I didn't get everything right back then, but when you haven't got it right, quickly face up to it and quickly correct it. And I didn't think that happened today. And I really do believe it has to happen tomorrow, because every day that more people are in work, the virus is spreading more than it should. And that's the problem.
Iain Duncan Smith, you've been putting pressure on your own Chancellor on this one. I wonder if you understand why we're nearly a week on from that first offer without seeing any understanding of what freelancers or the self-employed should be doing now, when it actually makes a difference in terms of them physically going to work.
Yes, I want greater support for self-employed. And this is one of two big problems at the moment that has got to be resolved by the government. The first is self-employed, and I want to come back to that. And the second is charities. With the self-employed, there has been some support put through in terms of the benefit system. But the next phase of this, and they've had to think this through carefully, how do you put a floor under the incomes of self-employed? It's not as simple as doing it for people who are employed on PAYE. This is about getting a record of what their earnings are and understanding how much you can raise those to. Now, I believe the government has reached a conclusion about that. The best way to do it is to look back over the average for the year. But that does leave out some who haven't been in self-employed for over a year. So there's another complication. So yes, I want more support, and I believe that the government is about to make an announcement, having worked that one through. Make an announcement, get it right. That's critical. The second bit, if you don't mind me saying so, is on charities. Now, I really do think we have an issue here. The charities are in a different way from businesses, because if they put somebody on furlough, they can't work in the charity, but they will be supported economically. But the problem you've got with the charities is that they want people to be working right now, particularly because they'll be supporting those who need that support. So that support needs to be to people who are in work and working in charities.
I think we will talk about charities, but there's something more, isn't there, at the moment? Because I know you in particular, you spent years of your life, and we're 7 years on, from universal credit. And I'm wondering whether you think that we will now look very differently at that going forward, because universal credit is one of those problems that has driven people to destitution. It's taken years to roll out. It has been horrendously complicated. And now, with this crisis, we've shown in a matter of days or weeks how simple it is to make the kind of gesture that can really help people's lives quickly. Would you concede that there is no way back to a system like universal credit after this?
No, absolutely wrong. The thing about universal credit is that it is more flexible than any of the previous benefits. So, for example, right now, it is an in-work and out-of-work benefit. So you have ability to immediately, which the government has done, to raise the benefit levels. The second thing they can do is to reduce the amount of deductions straight away. And the third element is to target that extra support to them in work and out of work. In the old system, you had a separate benefit for in work, a separate benefit for out of work. You had a separate benefit for those who were sick and disabled. These now come together in one go.
I'm just wondering whether you don't look at where we are now and say the government has managed to do something comprehensive and big and generous, and many people will be wondering why on earth it couldn't have done that 7, 8 years ago.
It depends if you're talking about the levels of benefit spending or the system. The system is flexible to any amount of money you want to put through it, and you can target it. That's how it's designed. Decisions taken about the amounts are policy decisions. They're not the same thing. So this is now universal credit will be supporting many more people because it's flexible enough to put a proper floor in all the way up into full-time work. So if they fall back onto a support package.
OK. Many thanks to you all indeed. Thanks very much for joining us.